you like really aware of the problem, and not just here in the United States but everywhere. By showing like the food security, it like gives a more like definite, this is how it is in this country, so you can like better understand their situation and possibly like what you could do to help.
The website's very interactive and it made it interesting to learn.
Congressman Joe Courtney from Connecticut's 2nd District, thank you for joining us.
Glad to be with you, Spencer.
First off, can you just tell us a little bit about your district and the kinds of agriculture within it?
Sure. So if you had a map of Connecticut and drew a line down the middle of it, everything to the right is the 2nd District, which is the most sparsely populated part of the state. So it's the most rural part of Connecticut, and actually really pretty interesting mixture of different agriculture producers. When I joined the Agriculture Committee, House Agriculture Committee, I was the first member of Congress from the state of Connecticut to sit on that committee in 100 years. And but actually, it's, I think, not just kind of a lark. I mean, it really is connected to something that's real in terms of a growing sector in Connecticut, and a lot of it is concentrated in eastern Connecticut.
So being the first Connecticut member in 100 plus years to serve on this committee, as well as being elected in the 110th Congress, but not serving on the Ag Committee until the 112th, was there a bit of a learning curve there when it came to issues related to ag policy?
Absolutely. Again, I'm a lawyer in terms of my background, and so issues like dairy pricing, the different commodity programs, conservation programs, all the different titles that go into the Farm Bill were pretty new stuff for a guy like me. And but we've built a really strong relationship with the Connecticut Farm Bureau, and again, the really interesting mixture of folks that do shellfish farming, that obviously the greenhouse industry in terms of nursery production, which is very high. Connecticut's a state where people love to garden, and I actually feel pretty comfortable now, with the agenda that gets dealt with at the Ag Committee every time we're in town.
And now that you've kind of got some feet under you, so to speak, on that committee, what are your priorities when it comes to your Ag Committee work?
Well, clearly in 2009, Connecticut's dairy producers experienced a real traumatic event with the crash of milk prices. And so as someone who co-chairs the Dairy Caucus, trying to really build a better system than the subsidy program that clearly was inadequate to try and rescue farms that were on the verge of bankruptcy, and some who did actually go out during that event. It's been a big area of work. And again, I'm actually quite pleased on balance with the new system of risk insurance that came out of the Farm Bill. This is a new system. It's change, and we've been out already interacting with dairy farmers in Connecticut to get them acclimated to the new program that's going to exist there. And in general, just trying to promote growth in the sector with, again, the exciting just proliferation of farmers markets everywhere. I'm sure it's all across the country, but Connecticut, consumers really have voted with their feet in terms of the growth and size of farmers markets. And again, some of the Department of Agriculture's marketing programs, which were boosted in the Farm Bill, are something that we're actively pursuing so that Connecticut gets its fair share. Again, the EQIP program, which helps farmers deal with making their land more efficient and obviously avoid runoff issues, is something that is very important in a small state like Connecticut. Again, land is precious, and the EQIP program, which again does a lot for the environment, but also frankly I think it does a lot for farmers to help them maximize every square inch of space so that they can succeed.
And having a little bit of seniority on your other committees, the Armed Services and the Education and the Workforce Committee, how do you adjust from being in a position of some seniority on those committees and subcommittees to coming into the Agriculture Committee?
Well, again, it's I think the chair and the ranking member kind of set the tone on that committee, and I don't think it's as hierarchical as some other committees have been. Again, during the whole Farm Bill process, both Chairman Lucas and Ranking Member Peterson, were very accessible, and their staff was very open to our suggestions, our amendments, concerns that we had, and I feel very lucky that, again, we have leadership like that, again, is not as rigid about, the food chain, to use a bad pun, in terms of, how the committee operates. So, I have no complaints. Again, as somebody who, as you point out, I'm a vice ranking member on Sea Power, and on the Education Committee, I'm ranking on workforce protection. You see committees sometimes operate a little differently in terms of that whole aspect. But the Ag Committee, I think, has been a very collegial place to be a member.
And the issue of labeling biotech ingredients on GMO foods is something that's becoming more and more prevalent every day, and Connecticut has a GMO labeling bill of its own. Do you think this is an issue that, as it moves forward, is going to be best addressed at the federal level or the state level?
Well, I think it's got a life of its own. Again, it was quite extraordinary to see how quickly it moved in Connecticut, which actually has, some bioscience companies and folks who are very active in that sector. Nonetheless, I think that the almost unanimous vote in the legislature and the governor's signature on that bill surprised everybody, and it speaks volumes, frankly. And I raised this issue with Secretary Vilsack when he came before committee this year, that we have got to find a way to, in my opinion, intelligently balance questions of transparency and consumer awareness, which I think is a losing argument to try and fight that, as well as education to make sure people understand that trying to promote growth and productivity shouldn't necessarily conflict with food safety. And that's really going to be, I think, an issue that's not going away. I don't think there's a one fix with a federal law that kind of takes over the whole system there, because we're a state that, or a country rather, that delegates power to the states, and agriculture policy, much of it is done at the state level. It's going to be, I think, a big task for the ag committees in both House and Senate to try and respond to what, again, I think is inevitable, that the consumer's demand is something that members of Congress and the Senate just can't ignore.
And looking outside of the realm of agriculture, what are some issues that you're working on that you think are, the most important and most prevalent issues to you and your constituents?
Well, again, as a member of the Education Committee, I'm pretty passionate about the fact that, long term, we've got to get this country's game up in terms of, our workforce for the future. And there's just no question that, starting at pre-K all the way through higher education, we've got problems, and it should hopefully be a nonpartisan issue. I think employers get it, that whether you're a submarine manufacturer in Groton, Connecticut, who requires the highest levels of skills in terms of design, engineering, even production, to guys who operate trucks who now have to use computer operated equipment just to run a rig on the highway, that our schools and our post-high school systems have to be revamped so that people can get the skills they need to succeed, and it has to be affordable. And that will benefit all sectors. The School of Agriculture at the University of Connecticut is the fastest growing school in the university system. And I think anybody in farming knows that having a highly trained workforce in agriculture is just as important as it is in shipbuilding or finance or law or medicine. And that really is something that I find frustrating down here, is that we just can't seem to find a virtuous cycle in terms of moving that critical issue.
And just to wrap up here, can you tell us a little bit about your personal background and what it really was that motivated you to run for Congress?
Well, again, I'm 61 years old. I'm married, got 2 kids. Was a state legislator for 8 years in Hartford. Left when we were expecting our second child, and I've always been pretty intensely interested in government and politics. I'm somebody who believes strongly that democracy is not a spectator sport, and obviously the fact that I made it to Congress, with an 83 vote margin in 2006, the closest race for Congress since the 1990s. I got a pretty strong dose of the message that every vote counts, probably more than anybody in this building. And so I tell people who are running for office, I don't recommend going through the recount process. It's pretty stressful. But having said that, been through it and lived to tell the tale, I mean, I actually think it's a very useful way to enter office, because you really realize that you're not here because of yourself. You're here because of people who took the time to vote and participate in the system. And I hope I never forget that. If I do, it's time to leave, because I think I've done some work that people are pleased with, and that they feel that their investment in me was worth it. And I'm an optimist about the fact that as tough and polarized as it is down here, that as Al Smith once said, the problems of democracy can only be solved by more democracy. People need to participate, and we need to, again, have people understand that it's not somebody else's job in a democracy to make decisions. We all have to do it together.
Congressman Joe Courtney from Connecticut's 2nd District, thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Spencer.